Welcome to the American Classroom Podcast, where we discuss the role of education in building a civil society. I'm Jared Taylor, and with me is Lindsay Crosling, and today we have Heidi Udall joining us. So we're excited to talk about first-year teachers. So welcome, Heidi. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Before we begin, I want to mention that the American Classroom Podcast today is sponsored by Heritage Academy. It's a K-12 school in Arizona. We're serving a little over 4,000 students. Can you believe that? It's great. Heritage Academy is committed to instilling the ideals and values of the great men and women who founded our country into the lives of these young people. And if there ever was a need for these values, now is the time for that. So we're grateful for Heritage sponsoring this podcast today. But Heidi, we're glad that you're joining us here for this conversation on first-year teachers.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
But tell our listeners a little bit about you and your experience as a first-year teacher.
So this is my 20th year as an educator. I spent 16 years in the classroom as a high school English teacher. And part of that time, I was an instructional coach. The last 4 years, I've served as the principal of Heritage Academy, Mesa. As a first-year teacher, I was a little bit unique, meaning that I had received my education in my 20s, and then I chose to step out of the profession and stay home for 13 years with my kids. So I was a first-year classroom teacher as a 37-year-old woman. And I think that my age gave me a little bit of credibility because no one knew that I was a first-year teacher.
You'd raised a few already.
Yeah, I had. And the persona I took on was a teacher mom, and it worked for me. My first year was a little overwhelming for a couple of reasons. First of all, I had 4 different classes that I was teaching, and I had never taught any of them.
Oh, wow. 4 different preps?
4 different preps.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Also, I hadn't really been a professional before, and so I needed to learn how to be a professional. I'm a professional type person, but functioning in a profession is a skill that you have to acquire. Also, it was so much because I had 4 kids at home. I had 4 different preps, and it was just every day trying to get by. Sometimes I would be reading the story during lunch that I was teaching in 30 minutes. And my department chair kept saying, all you have to do is be 10 minutes ahead of the students.
10 minutes. Oh, wow.
10 minutes, just 10 minutes ahead of the students. And part of the reason I survived is because I had 2 incredible mentor teachers who gave me their curriculum and helped talk me through the curriculum because I just didn't even know what I didn't know. There was a distance between my education, my student teaching, and me actually having a classroom. But it was amazing how I could feel the files in my head opening up. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember this. Oh, yeah, I remember this. Oh, yeah. And so those files had been closed and were dusty, but I was able to open that file drawer and find what I needed.
From your undergrad?
From my undergrad and my master's, yeah. So it was, I had a very skilled and seasoned teacher. I will never forget this conversation. I was standing at the copy machine a couple of days before school started, and she came up and introduced herself. She was the AP art teacher, and she said, "Are you new?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "Do you have kids at home?" And I said, "I do." And she looked at me in all earnestness and said, "I'm going to give you a piece of advice." She said, "Never choose your students over your kids. Your students won't appreciate it, and your kids will never forget." And so that advice really helped me balance what I was managing at home and what I was managing in the classroom.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Well, those 13 years at home school.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably helped you.
Certainly. And, I think most first-year teachers' greatest challenge is the classroom management. And that takes a few years to get under your belt. And so while I had been managing kids and I had been teaching in different capacities, it's putting the routines, the structures, the procedures in place that you need to learn to run a really efficient classroom, because the whole goal of a teacher is to capitalize on instructional time. You want to be able to have as much time teaching and learning as possible. And it's through those structures and routines that the learning can happen without distraction, or the transitions can be smooth. And that is a lot of of trial and error, but also just gleaning information and watching skilled teachers in action.
Well, I think your story is important because people, when we think of first year teachers, we think of fresh outs, young 20s, right after their bachelor's degree, getting their first classroom job. But I think more and more we are seeing people that are returning, or maybe as a second profession is still in their first year. We've talked about on another show how we get some attorneys. They've been big and tough in the courtroom, putting bad guys away or doing things like that. And then they want to teach after they retire as an attorney, and they get into a classroom with 14-year-olds. They're like, "What just happened? I thought I knew what I was doing."
I think you make a good point. As I've been reflecting on this topic about first year teachers and how do you best support them, it so much depends on who they are and where they're coming from. Because you do have your fresh outs some who have just completed an education program at a university. And so they have some classroom exposure. They have some mentor teachers who have supervised them. They've had some practice in the classroom. And so for them, what they're going to struggle with is very different than someone leaving industry or the business world or the legal world and stepping in. They will have credibility because of their past experience, and they'll have that credibility because of their age, but they don't necessarily have the skill set to manage a class. And so, managing a first-year teacher who has already been successful is different. You have to approach them differently. You have to coach them differently. And then you've got everything in between, right? You have people like me who in their 30s decided to embark on their career, who had the training but had been out of the classroom. So how we support first-year teachers is really individualized depending on where they're coming from and what their past experience is.
That's great. Did you want to add?
No, I just think that's so relevant. I think even I just thought of an example where my son, he's young, and I had questions about his homework, and I went to the teacher to ask, and she was very defensive and very like, "Why are you questioning?" And my heart just said, if she had kids, she was just right out of university. If she had kids and she was trying to help them with their own homework, she wouldn't be so abrasive. She would understand why a parent is asking this question and wanting to find ways to support their child. And so I'm like, it just will take experience and time for her to understand. And I can just say to her, help her along. But from the parent perspective, it's hard. It's maybe easier from a principal to coach your teachers and help them and provide mentors to assist them along their journey.
I think, yes, I don't know that it's easier from the principal than the parent, but I do think that's something that we all have in common, whether it is the principal or the parent or the teacher, frankly, is where we can meet and find common ground is the care for that young person. And so when we have a hot parent who comes in frustrated, or a parent even just asking questions, if the assumption is, oh, they're here advocating for their child or they care deeply about their child, then great, let's have a conversation. But it's typically when I think when a teacher becomes defensive, it's because they are not certain yet of their own practices. Because to your point, they haven't had enough experience for them to really even understand how those practices play out long term. And they're doing their best. And teaching is a completely immersive career because you're teaching the whole person. And yes, we have a curriculum we're teaching, but the psychology of the child, the emotions of the child, the home life of the child, the physical well-being of the child all play into whether or not they are open to learning that day. And every day is a new day. Yeah, every day is a new day.
Well, Heidi, one of the goals that we're thinking of in recording this particular podcast is to help the first-year teachers. And a lot of first-year teachers don't even know what they don't know. That's part of it.
Amen.
That's part of it. I got to start an economics class, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I read Harry Wong, and that's a great book. And, you get things taught in teacher prep programs, but then you get in the classroom and it all falls out your ears. And you touched on some of the challenges as well, but what are some other challenges? And we hope first-year teachers listen to this. What should they also be aware of that we can kind of get ahead of in terms of their first year? What have you seen as you've mentored those first-year teachers?
I think the most important thing that a first-year teacher can do is is be open to feedback and be reflective. And that's where the mentor, teacher, and the administration will come into play, is acknowledging that I don't know everything. I am here trying to be a teacher with all the best intentions. But sometimes lessons will flop and sometimes lessons will soar, and just accept that that roller coaster is part of the learning process. And I think of one of our first year teachers last year. We matched him up with a mentor who does not teach the same subject matter, but they office share. She's a very confident, seasoned teacher. And this new teacher we hired had no teaching experience. He had no education background, but we saw potential in him. And he, through hard work, was able to create a solid curriculum. And what he needed most was reassurance and confidence that, yes, what you're doing will work. And when it doesn't, then let's problem solve. And this mentor was able to just reassure him, but he was open. He was open to being reflective. He was open to trying new things. He understood, I'm going to have my good lessons. I'm going to have my struggle lessons. I'm going to have my up days, my bad days. So it's that resilience and just keep trying. And so I think for first-year teachers, it's just accepting that you're going to have lessons that flop. My department chair used to come up to me when she could see it in my face. She would grab me by the shoulders. She'd get 3 inches from my face, look me in the eye and say, "You're not hurting them." That's something I like to say to our new teachers is, listen, that lesson that went bad did not hurt them. It didn't harm them. They learned something today because you came prepared to teach them. And if they were receptive, they learned something. So really, every day is a success on some level. And so what do you take away from that? I think the other components, so them being resilient and open to feedback and just reflective is important. The other thing is, I think from an administrative or coaching perspective, it's that mentor relationship that is critical. And something that I learned is that the subject area mentor isn't as important as the personality match and geography, meaning the mentor needs to be geographically close to that new teacher. So like the example I gave was their office mates. So they're seeing each other all the time because so many of your questions as a new teacher are spontaneous. You've just taught a lesson and you have a question about something. And so if that person is nearby, then they can be there to bounce off.
Help out.
Yeah, about the lesson. And so the department chair or the team lead in elementary will typically help with the curriculum, but you need that person there to just bounce around those everyday classroom management things that
They see the nuances and the little things, but they can also point out all the good things too, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And isn't it fair to say that you can have a great lesson and you can do a good job teaching, but if the students are just cranky, it's going to feel like a failure? I mean, like the day after Halloween.
The sugar crash.
Right. There's probably lots of great lessons delivered, but are they ready to learn? Other times it's the students or the teacher is truly not prepared, but the students are prepared to learn. But when it's...
Yeah. Well, and so, I mean, I have many philosophies, but one of the philosophies I have about students or scholars is I believe every scholar who shows up wants to learn. And sometimes teachers talk about they don't want to learn. And I'm like, no, they're sitting in that chair. They walked into your class by their own free will.
Yeah.
And they do want to learn. And so for first-year teachers, just remembering that this is a group project.
It's a good mindset.
They are learning with you, but the fact they showed up today, they want to learn. And I think something that teachers learn over time is as you are designing curriculum, and this is clearly not your first year, but this is where a mentor teacher could help you. You're not going to plan a heavy curriculum day the day after Halloween. You're going to have a meaningful lesson, but it's going to understand, again, that whole child and where they probably were out late, they're having their sugar crash. So let's engage them. Maybe it's a more physical, kinesthetic lesson than just a sit and listen lesson. And so those are tricks and skills that your master teachers have learned. So there's just so many layers to it. But I don't think first year teachers need to worry about that kind of stuff. I think first year, it's about building confidence.
It must be hard for the perfectionist teachers that want to do everything right, get all the answers right, and everybody clap like a trained seal. But then they get into these classrooms that, you have real human beings and they're going to go all over the place. And
Hence my department chair to the
I know,
perfectionist.
and grabs your shoulder. and
Grabbed
says,
my
You're
shoulders.
not hurting them.
You are not hurting them. Yeah, because things did not go perfectly. I do have a funny story, though. I bet it was 3 days into my first year teaching. And again, I'd been a stay-home mom. My kids ranged in age from 6 to 13 when I started back in the classroom. And I stood up and we were going to write an in-class essay. And I said, I need everybody to get out a piece of paper, a pencil, and put your backpacks on the floor. And they did it. I was like, whoa, they do what I ask, because my kids didn't. And like immediately. And I remember feeling odd by that because, my kids didn't do everything I asked.
What?
But it also was so powerful of, Heidi, they see you as an authority. You need to use that authority very carefully, because that influence is powerful. And a teacher can make or break a child's day, a child's year. And something I've often thought about is, I don't think that teaching or education has always maybe received the credit that it deserves. Sometimes like, well, I'm just a teacher, or I'm going into education, and people might be a little ashamed of that. But I don't care who you are or where you are in life. Everybody can identify a favorite teacher or a teacher that changed their life for good or bad.
Yeah.
Everybody can.
Powerful.
It is very powerful.
And are we lucky to be in this time of their formative years where we can really be uplifting and strength for them?
Another thing for supporting first-year teachers, because I know that's really the focus of this podcast, is I think administrators need to create a really a clear system for how first-year teachers can feel successful, especially, again, speaking to those perfectionists. Like, how do I measure my success? Because so much of what we do is not measurable. Yes, we have standardized tests, but I contend the best things teachers do every day cannot be measured by a bubble sheet. And so if administrators can set very clear expectations and create a structure where new teachers can feel mini gains, little successes, I think that's really powerful. So just an example of some of the things that we do on our campus, we've talked about the importance of a strong mentor. And then meeting, I think that the admin needs to meet with those new teachers very regularly and have that open door policy, check in on them, not as a, like, you made a mistake, but just how are you? How can we support you? We have a Monday Teaching Like a Hero. The first quarter, every Monday, all the new teachers on campus, whether they're experienced or a first-year teacher, come for a half an hour and we talk about our successes of the week and our struggles, and we problem solve together.
You find that helpful for the first years?
What it does is it creates a cohort where they can be vulnerable of what they don't know, because they can ask that question, or like, I don't know how to do this, or who do I talk to about that, or this didn't go well. Does anyone have any help or ideas? And it's just really an open forum of problem solving together, but also succeeding together. So I not every campus has to do that, but I just think having very regular contact. My first couple of years as principals, we met once a month in the morning, and I had a list of things to review with them of just, for example, picture day is coming up. Here's how we do that on our campus.
Yeah.
We don't send home report cards. So here's what end of quarter or end of semester looks like. We have testing coming up. What are your responsibilities? And some of that is cultural, like what is the culture of your school? But I think an administrator, they can do a lot of things to set new teachers up for success. Set those first-year teachers, like preempt some of their questions so that they don't feel like they don't know what they're doing, because they don't feel like they feel like they don't know what they're doing.
They're pretty aware of it, and sometimes they can feel like they're just out on an island and out like, okay, what am I doing? Am I doing okay?
Yeah,
How am I doing?
exactly. And so just that reinforcement, and then just identifying specifics of where they are succeeding. So let's say they're struggling with classroom management because most new teachers do. And so, you break it down just like you would in the classroom when you teach students. It's like, okay, let's work on how you begin class, because the beginning of class will set the tone for class. And part of it is just teaching them how to stand with authority, how to speak with authority, how to set the expectation. The bell rings, expect them to be in their seats, expect them to have their stuff out. How do you do that? Right on the board. When you sit down, please get out blank. And so just helping them learn those procedures. And then when you go into their classroom, you go at the beginning and you see how it's going, and then you follow up. Have you noticed improvement in management because of the way you're now starting class? And so you just chunk it into small pieces. Anybody can change the first 5 minutes of class. Now the rest may just devolve into chaos, but really that first 5 minutes does set the tone, where you establish yourself as an authority, and then you have procedures in place that allows that learning to immediately begin. So
That's fun.
yeah, it is. It's really fun, and then they can feel success.
And that's important. They need to know that they're right where they need to be, right? In their growth. At the first year teacher, you're doing great. And I hope some listeners of this realize that we want more first year teachers, right? Whether they're fresh outs or their second career or changing careers. I never got the feel working with principals or superintendents that they didn't want someone to take a shot at it if they thought. I mean, I always felt a very welcoming environment. It wasn't, oh, this is our craft. We're too, it's very technical. You're never going to get this. The opposite is true. Come into teaching. This is so fun. You're going to really see the value and the meaning in this profession versus other professions where you're just making car parts or airplane parts or computer parts, right?
Well, that's the thing. As an educator, it's just such a meaningful career. My husband's a lawyer, and I remember one day coming home frustrated. It wasn't year one, but it was in the first 5 years of teaching. And, I was struggling with a couple of classes, probably, still getting curriculum under my feet. And I just said, Joe, I just don't know if I can do this. And he looked at me and he said, Heidi, you are changing people's lives. I said, I don't know. He said, all I do is shuffle papers across a desk all day. And that's not.
That's downplaying it a little bit.
That's downplaying it. But he said, you get to impact lives every day. Focus on that. And, again, that perfectionism coming in, but it's true. But I do think teachers stick with it because the students change your life. And not to get emotional, it's like my life has been so enriched by being a teacher and just having, like, it stretches you in ways that you just can't anticipate. And then the people impact you so powerfully. You watch them struggle to learn, and you get to sit by their side and help them overcome that struggle or push through that struggle. And I think one of the other mottos I have is that learning is risky business. It's risky because what you're asking students to do is tell you what they don't know. And that's not comfortable. And when they raise their hand to volunteer, or when you call on them to give a response, you've put them in a vulnerable position, because they might think they know, and they might know, but they might not know. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong, and sometimes it's just thinking out loud. And so it's so important that you create that safe environment. But then flipping it to the new teacher, being a new teacher is risky business, because you are putting yourself out there every day, acting like you know what you're doing, acting like you know what you're talking about. And you might not. And so I do think that is actually an important process for teachers to go through, because it helps you remember what your scholars are going through every day. Sitting in those chairs, trying to learn new things is hard.
What would you say to a new teacher who is really worried that they're going to be asked a question that they can't answer?
I would say it's okay to not know everything, and that you can model being a learner to your teacher or to your students. So if you don't know something, say, I am not sure. Let's problem solve that together. Let's look that up. What do you guys think? And I think being a visible learner helps them take more risks.
First year teaching, what a great, great stories. Love that. We need more teachers. We need more first year teachers wherever they come from. There's a role in education for great teachers, and they come from all disciplines.
Do you think that if a teacher for the first year, and I know you said that, like, I love your examples, if they're coming in straight out of your university, or if they've been at home with their children, or if they're coming from a private sector. But is there a difference? Would you say you've taught in public schools, you've taught in charter schools, or I should say like standard district public school? Would you say there's a difference in preparation to go in as a first year teacher to these different types of schools, or would you say first year teacher is first year teacher?
I think first year teacher is first year teacher. Because there's the content knowledge that someone from the private sector is going to have. Like Jared is going to know economics. He has that content knowledge, but that is that's knowledge. There's a skill set that teachers have to develop. And that skill set makes a teacher effective, whether they're at the district school, a private school, a charter school. And that skill set for teaching. So in my mind, I've separated them. You've got the content expertise, and we have lots of content experts out there, but they wouldn't necessarily be great teachers because there's the teacher part. And teaching is, I think, like many professions, there's the art to it, there's the science to it, right? So you've got the professional development where you can learn things, you can refine your craft. That is the science part of it. The art part of it is the heart. The art part of it is the creativity and how you present a lesson. It's structuring that curriculum. There is the science piece, but there can also be that really creative piece. That's one of my favorite parts. I love designing. Yeah, I love designing a curriculum and imagining how it's going to play out, and then having the opportunity to teach it and then see how it morphs. So yeah, and often when you have a lot of experience, you become able to predict, right, how the scholars or students are going to respond. But a first-year teacher doesn't need to worry about any of that. If they can just teach the basics and really focus those first couple of years on developing those teacher skills, I assume the heart is there for most of them because that's why they've chosen the profession. They care about people. They care about education. And so if they will focus on the science part, the art, the heart and the art part will come
That's
out.
right.
Do you feel like teachers who had a student teaching year prior to coming in, do you feel like that helps them, or what experience can they take from that stepping into their first year?
I do think student teaching is really helpful because it teaches a lot of those day-to-day procedures and practices that otherwise, if you don't have that, you're learning on your own. I don't think it is a prerequisite, though, to a master teacher. I know many teachers who didn't go through the traditional educational path who are incredible in the classroom. And so is it helpful? Yeah, it's helpful. Is it necessary? Not necessarily. I think what's necessary is that especially if they haven't had that experience, that they are paired up with a really strong mentor.
And I don't think good districts or charters would be opposed to someone that's doing a career change. Usually the economics just don't work out, but why wouldn't they want to give someone a chance to try it out, before they make a big jump? As administrators, we have that in our best interest. We want to make sure that they're in it, right? And it's the right profession for them if they're going to make a big change. And we're going to make a big commitment, whether it's a contract or an offer or something like that. But
Well, and I think you hit on something too. That first year is a little bit of a dance of the candidate or the new teacher is trying you out, trying out the career, and you are trying them out. And so it's a little bit of dating. And yes, you've gone through the screening process and have decided that they are a good fit and that they have potential. But, it doesn't always work out. And sometimes it's not that they don't want to be in education. It's that it's just not a good fit. But other times they just should not be in education. And that's okay. But it is, I think most people can learn to be a good teacher. It takes hard work, and it takes just resilience and being open to feedback.
Yeah. And they'll find their voice. Eventually, they'll find their rhythms and cadence, and it'll be different than everybody else. But that's part of what adds to the beauty of a school is a child can see all these different talented teachers and learn, from everyone's different style, and they'll take whatever they take from it.
Well, we have a teacher on our campus right now. She's not a first-year teacher, but she's pretty understated. Like when you talk to her, personality's understated. And in the classroom, she's understated. She knows her stuff inside and out. One day I was having a one-on-one with her, and I said to her, "Tell me your greatest strength." And she said, "My passion."
Oh,
And I thought, oh, wow, there is a lot going on underneath. She says, "My passion for scholars." And it manifests not in a big personality, big teaching style. It manifests in she's here every day after school tutoring kids one-on-one. It manifests in that she has a very organized and logical curriculum. It manifests in so many other ways, but it took me aback for a minute because she's like my passion in her very subdued, understated way. But it's there. And that's to your point. Great teachers look different.
still waters run deep.
That's right. And they appeal to different personalities because we have those scholars sitting in our seats as well.
I love that. And I bet her scholars feel that passion. I've had history teachers who jump up on the table and they're shouting and their arms in the air. And then you have they're passionate about their subject matter. And then you have the teachers that you feel it quietly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Some people think they have to be like the Dead Poets Society, that everyone has a voice, to teach in some ways. And that's one thing that I like about your systems is you can help them find it. Just first off, be patient, get the basics down, get those foundational elements, habits, rhythms, just as part of your daily routines and patterns. And then you're going to get into that stage where you're in that sweet spot and you're just going and enjoying. And
Yeah, and part of I think what makes being a teacher so satisfying is you've never arrived. And you've never arrived. And one of my core values is I'm a learner. I'm very curious. I'm a learner. Like if you said, what is one thing to describe you? I'm a learner. That's the way I would describe myself. And with teaching is you figure out the teaching skill part, but then you're always adapting and changing because we are in the industry of people, and people are complicated, and they change. And from grade level to grade level, from class to class, from year to year, you are teaching a room full of people. And so you have to adapt what you're doing. Well, you don't have to. If you want to feel successful and offer the best education you can, like you have to recognize your audience, and your audience is different from year to year, from class period to class period. And that's exciting. And that's what keeps it fresh. That's what keeps it interesting. And so like there can be teachers who teach, quote, the same curriculum year after year. But I was talking to one of our English teachers this week, our 8th grade English teacher. And I said, "How was your day?" And she said, "I feel a little off my rhythm." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I'm moving around my curriculum." And I said, "Why are you moving it around?" And she said, "Because I just felt like the scholars, I needed to switch some things up because they just weren't prepared in this one area. So I needed to reteach it." And I said, "I don't think the scholars feel that it's off rhythm." And she said, "Oh, I'm sure they don't. I just feel off rhythm." But to my point is like, that's what a great teacher does, is they are behind the scenes making adjustments and adaptations. But for the scholars every day, they have great opportunities to learn. And first year teachers, some of those emotions that you feel of uncertainty of, okay, how am I going to approach this? Those problem solving skills you learn, you continue to tap into those, even as an experienced teacher. And maybe you just get more comfortable with being uncomfortable.
you got to live in ambiguity and embrace it. And
Yeah. But it is so joyful. I had one of our scholars, I was visiting with him, I think it might have been at lunch, and I asked him about a specific teacher, and he said, she is so joyful. And he said, she comes into the class every day and she's just joyful. And he used that word, and it's a ninth grade English class. And I thought, wow, he goes, she's happy, she's joyful. You can tell she's having a good time. And
And they are too, probably.
learning is fun. Yeah, learning's fun.
I think my daughter had that teacher you're talking
Yeah.
about, because
Yeah.
she described one of her teachers as just like happy and positive, and she loved it. It made a hard subject better.
Yeah.
So you shared a lot of great stories about your first year and how you had support. And then we've talked a little bit about when we interview first-year teachers to come into a school. What advice would you give first-year teachers, as they're shopping for schools, right? They graduate or they're going back into teaching and they're looking at schools. What are those critical pieces that are going to help them in their first year? You mentioned mentors, but what would you say as they're interviewing at jobs? What's something they should look for?
So one of my second-year teachers, he asked a question in his interview that I thought, oh, wow, that's a great question. He looked at me and said, so how will you measure my success as a first-year teacher?
Interesting.
So that was where I was like, well, how will we measure? I need to
Yep.
come up with a rubric, right? And then I think that would be a good question, because it helps them understand what the school is looking for, what the administrator's looking for. But the other question I would ask is, what kind of programs do you have in place for new teachers, for first-year teachers? And, if they have a mentoring program in place or some professional development. We have a classroom management course that we will run first-year teachers through second semester. That first semester is so overwhelming. You don't know what you don't know. And then once you have some experience underneath your belt, when you teach those concepts, they go, oh, now I understand why this is working and this isn't working. Or, oh, I can try that. Because you can teach it and it's theoretical until it's practical, right? And so I think those are the two questions I would ask is how do you determine whether a first-year teacher is successful, and what kind of programs do you have in place to support new teachers?
That's great. And I would respond with the answer, and then I'd say, well, how are you going to measure your success as well?
Yep, exactly.
And that's golden when you see they'll take their ownership of their own professional development, because we're going to do the very best that we can, but none of it matters unless they're motivated, unless they're focused on some things. And once those are aligned, there's magic.
Yep.
Heidi, thank you. Sure. This is fun to talk a little bit about this fun subject. It makes a lot of people nervous to think, oh, can I go into teaching? Yes, you can go into teaching. You can make the change. You can be a first-year teacher too, and you can have the stories and scars and live to tell about it.
Yeah.
But you will change lives.
You will change
You will
lives.
change lives.
And they will change your life too.
Yeah. Any last words on that?
I think that it's okay for teachers to have balance in their life.
Yeah.
And
I was just pitching another episode on boundaries and balance, because I think it's something we need to have like a whole other podcast on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
So I had written down like, what are the challenges of first-year teachers? And one of the things I wrote down is that work-life balance.
Balance, yeah.
And I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but if you take care of yourself and your home life, your personal life, you bring such a healthier person to the classroom. I didn't take a lot of work home, but I was very efficient in the workday. And I had one day a week that I stayed late. It was Friday, because my kids were not having to do homework on Friday. And so I didn't usually come home Fridays till about 6, but I had everything lined up for Monday. So whatever happened over the weekend, I knew my copies were made. I was ready for Monday. And I would, I guess, say to teachers, you can create routines. You can create that work-life balance. And And then it just makes everything more enjoyable.
That's great. Go change some lives.
Yeah, go change some
and
lives.
let your life be
Yeah.
changed.
I love that you shared that. I think it's something that's not talked about enough. And so for teachers to understand that that's important. I think we assume if you're working a corporate job, right, only people on Wall Street work long hours. No, teachers are taking it home into their personal lives. And so to create that balance is so important for them to be the best that they can be when they show up to work, just like any other career.
Yeah.
And aren't we so lucky to live in a country where we can have school in a box?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning it's not taking 6 of the 7 days and it's not grinding. And I mean, it can be. There's definitely school systems that are doing that. But the American classroom is one that can be focused and it can be very efficient and it can be a great reward for the teacher and the learner. And that profession can be very rewarding in a lot of different ways. Thank you.
So here's my final line.
Please.
If you choose to become a teacher, you wake up every morning excited that you get to be a teacher.
To go to class.
You get excited because you get to go and spend time with young people who have amazing energy. And typically teachers are teaching something that they feel passionately about. Like, how fun is it to sit and read a book and talk about a book with someone? Because I'm an English person. Or to be able to read somebody's thoughts on paper that they've expressed. You get to know them at such a different level. And there's just so many meaningful parts of being a teacher. So I wake up every day excited to come to school, excited to see growth. And I will argue this till the day I die. Learning feels good. It just feels
That's great.
good.
And hopefully at the end of that day, they feel even better. They might be tired and worn out,
Yep.
maybe frustrated by some administrative bureaucracy or something, but they probably feel better. But maybe we should have Heidi back to talk about how teachers find joy and gratitude in what they're doing and that development, because that's development too.
It is. It is.
It takes work.
It does take work. And even that first year, I went back a second, I went back a third. Here it is 20 years later. So much satisfaction. There's just so much satisfaction. And I get teary every year at graduation. And I've been a high school teacher because I look at these individuals who are walking across the stage and I know stories about them. I have seen their struggles. I have seen them overcome. Even your top scholars, they have struggles, and it is such a victorious experience. And I love it. Yeah.
It's like nothing else.
Like nothing else. I stood at the cross country meet last Saturday just bawling my eyes out because they left it all on the field. They've given everything they have to give. And that's what you get to experience as a teacher is you see people dig deep, and then it is amazing what they are able to produce.
Heidi, thank you. This is great. Grateful for the time that you've taken here today. Those of you that are listening, if you could rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to it, please join and subscribe to our newsletters to stay current on the latest episodes. And we're grateful to cover first-year teachers today. Thank you.